Do you know who I am? I donated millions to this school. I will have your job gone before this school day ends.
That's your right, sir. But you're still not getting to that student.
She was not supposed to come back. That was what the men in the black SUVs thought when they drove past the school 6 months later. But they were wrong. And so was the billionaire who had made the worst decision of his life. St. Marcellus Academy never really slept. Lights stayed on late. Teachers graded papers. Janitors moved quietly through empty halls. Teachers moved fast and said little because at schools like this, one bad moment could change a child's life. Amara Brooks had worked there for 6 years. At 32, she was the one the younger teachers came to when a student shut down, when a parent exploded in the office, when a scholarship child stopped showing up and nobody else knew what to do. She was the calm that held everything together. She was also 7 months pregnant. Her feet hurt. Her lower back carried a dull, grinding ache that started around hour 4 of every school day. But she never mentioned it. She simply rubbed her belly once between classes, took a slow breath, and kept moving. None of her co-workers knew much about her life outside the school. She did not talk about where she grew up. She did not mention family. When people asked, she smiled and changed the subject. Nobody knew. Nobody was supposed to. Nobody knew that the quiet teacher arranging essays in room 214 was the foster sister of Silas Brooks. And Silas Brooks did not work in schools. Silas did not attend charity galas or appear in donor photographs. He moved through the city like a current beneath still water, invisible until the moment he decided to destroy something. He was one of the most feared men in the criminal world no one admitted existed. His organization had no official name. His face appeared in no police database. He had kept that world entirely away from Amara for years, not because he was ashamed of her, but because she had asked him to. "Let me be normal," she had told him once when they were teenagers. "Let me just be a person." He had honored that, always. But peace, as it turns out, has enemies. The front doors at the end of the main hallway slammed open at 11:42 a.m. Every head turned. The man walking through them wore a dark overcoat that cost more than most teachers made in 2 months. His name was Mason Erickson. He was 45 years old, the founder of 2 tech companies, and a man who had never once heard the word no without consequence. Behind him, Ethan Erickson followed with red eyes and a face full of practiced injury. 15 minutes earlier, Ethan had been standing over Mateo Alvarez by the West Lockers. Mateo was 15, a scholarship student, Spanish immigrant. Quiet, careful with his English because he still worried the wrong word would make people laugh. His books had been on the floor. His lunch had spilled across the tile, and Ethan had been holding Mateo's scholarship folder in one hand, reading from it out loud. "So this is how you got in." The boys beside him laughed. Mateo reached for the folder. Ethan lifted it higher. "Relax," Ethan said. "I'm just trying to understand charity." That was when Amara stepped into the hallway. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. "Give him the folder, Ethan." Ethan looked at her like she had interrupted something that belonged to him. "Or what? Give him the folder." Students slowed down. Teachers looked out from classrooms. A young teacher named Rachel Kim stood near the copier, papers frozen in her hands. Ethan's mouth twisted. He shouldn't even be here. "But he is here," Amara said, "and you're going to pick up his books." Ethan laughed. "I'm not touching his stuff." Amara looked at the boys beside him. "Then all of you can explain to Principal Pike why a student's lunch is on the floor." One boy bent down. Then another. Ethan's face changed, because boys like him don't like to lose in front of people. Mateo took the folder back with shaking hands. Amara turned to him. "Room 214, she said gently. "Wait there." Mateo nodded and went. Ethan stormed toward the office. And now his father was walking through the school like he owned the building, which in his mind, he nearly did. His last donation had funded the new science center. He had the framed letter from the board to prove it. "I need that teacher now," Mason said, his voice cut through the hallway. "Not a counselor, not a vice principal. That teacher. Now." A young administrator named Colin hurried toward him, hands out, voice low. "Sir, we can discuss this in the office. Classes are in session." Mason grabbed Colin's blazer and shoved him sideways. The whole hallway stopped breathing. Mason stepped forward, heading toward room 214. His eyes scanned the doors, the students, the teachers, anyone who would just do what he said. Amara stepped out of room 214. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. Mason stopped walking, his jaw tightened. He looked at her the way powerful men sometimes look at people they have already decided do not matter. Like she was furniture that had mysteriously started talking. "Do you know who I am?" His voice dropped into something uglier. "I donated millions to this school. I will have your job gone before this school day ends." "That's your right, sir," Amara Brooks said. She didn't move. "But you're still not getting to that student." Something shifted in his face. The controlled anger cracked and something colder came through. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather card holder. He flipped it open and held it toward Colin, who had pressed himself against the wall. "Write me a number," Mason said. "Whatever it takes to move that boy out of this school. I don't care where. I need him gone." Colin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Amara spoke instead. "Put that away." Her voice didn't shake once. "Money doesn't decide which children get protected. Mateo did nothing wrong. Your son did." Mason turned to her slowly, the card holder still open. "You're a teacher," he said, and the way he said it made the words sound like an insult. "You don't make those calls in this school." "I do." For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Mason launched into it. Loud, ugly, relentless. He called her incompetent. He said her classroom looked like a charity case. He talked about her salary, her education, her place. He said things that made the students in the hallway look down at the floor in shame. Amara absorbed every word without flinching. She turned toward the wall phone to call security. That was when Mason grabbed her. The sound of it was wrong. Too sharp for a school. Too loud. His hand closed around her arm with full force. He shoved her sideways. Her shoulder hit the lockers hard. The folder in her hand dropped and slid across the floor. She stumbled back, one hand catching the edge of the trophy case, and both hands flew instinctively to her belly, both of them wrapping around the curve of it, protecting it. She didn't fall, but her eyes closed for 1 second. And that second said everything. The hallway was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind that follows something irreversible. Rachel Kim stood frozen near the copier, both hands pressed to her mouth. The security guard near the stairwell had his hand on his radio, but hadn't moved. Nobody had moved. It was like the air had been sucked out of the building. Mason straightened his coat. "Maybe now you understand how this works," he said. Down the hallway near the exit doors, a tall man in a black coat stood with his hands in his pockets. He hadn't moved since the doors opened. He had watched the entire thing. The shove, the threats, the way Amara's hands went to her stomach. He had a small tattoo on the left side of his neck, a raven's wing half open, dark against his skin. He didn't pull out a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He took out his phone, typed 4 words, and sent them. Then he walked out the side door. Principal Warren Pike arrived 60 seconds later. He was 59 years old, silver-haired, and known for staying calm whenever wealthy parents were angry. He walked in, surveyed the scene. Amara, still steadying herself beside the lockers. Mason, standing with his arms crossed. Students and teachers frozen around them. And he made his decision in under 3 seconds. He chose wrong. Mr. Erickson. Warren Pike moved toward Mason with his hand already extended, voice smooth. "I am so sorry for this. Let's get this taken care of immediately." Amara stared at him. He didn't look at her, not once. Mason rolled his shoulders. "Your teacher was aggressive and interfered with disciplinary matters," he said. "She embarrassed my son and obstructed school administration." Warren Pike nodded like he was listening to a reasonable weather report. He didn't check the hallway cameras. He didn't ask the students what happened. He didn't look at the red mark spreading near Amara's shoulder where she had hit the lockers. Didn't look at the pregnant woman 10 feet away with both hands still resting near her stomach. He turned toward her and his voice went flat. "I'm going to have to let you go. Effective immediately. Please surrender your classroom keys and clear your desk. The shock hit somewhere behind her ribs. Not the words. She had half expected the words the moment Warren Pike walked into the hallway and didn't check on her first. It was the witnesses that stayed with her, the students, the teachers, the security guard, all the people who had watched Mason Erickson shove a pregnant teacher into lockers and were now staring at the floor. Rachel Kim stood near the copier, with tears sitting in her eyes. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Two security guards walked Amara to her classroom, not roughly, but firmly, like someone had instructed them to make it look official. She handed over her keys, packed her desk into a cardboard box, student essays, coffee mug, sticky notes, a sweater she kept for cold classrooms, the little cactus one of her students had bought her last semester's. She walked down the long main hallway, past classrooms she had taught in for years, past the teacher's lounge, where she had eaten, rushed lunches between grading, past the library, where she had helped scholarship students write essays for schools they never thought they could afford, past the donor wall with Mason Erickson's name fixed in polished brass. The front doors opened. Cold rain hit her face. She stood on the wet steps with the cardboard box pressed against her hip and pulled out her phone. There was already an email waiting, a law firm. Mason Erickson was suing her. Emotional distress. Professional interference. She read it twice, then started walking. The next morning, her card was declined at the grocery store. Her accounts had been frozen. Mason's legal team had moved fast. When she got home, an eviction notice was taped to her apartment door. She sat in the dark apartment, put both hands on her stomach, and breathed slowly until the shaking stopped. She had left her old life because she wanted something clean, something earned, something that belonged only to her. She had built it over 6 years, student by student, class by class, one ordinary day at a time. Now it was gone in a single afternoon. She sat with that reality for a long time. Then she stood, went to the bedroom closet, moved a stack of old lesson plans and storage boxes, and pulled out the fireproof case hidden behind them. Inside was a phone. She charged it once a year, just in case had arrived. She dialed a number she had memorized years ago. Silas Brooks answered on the first ring. He already knew. He had been in the hallway. He had seen the shove happen in real time, seen her hands go to her stomach, watched Warren Pike choose a donor over one of the best teachers in the school. He had walked out through the side doors, not because he didn't care, but because Amara had made him promise years ago that he would never act unless she asked. He had spent the last 22 hours waiting. When her voice came through the phone, quiet and frayed around the edges, he closed his eyes. "I need help," she said. That was all. "You don't have to say anything else," Silas said. His voice was calmer than she had ever heard it. "Go to sleep. I'll handle it." He set the phone down on the glass table in his office, looked out at the city lights below, and made 4 calls. By morning, Mason Erickson's problems had already begun. Mason found out at dinner. He was at his private club, Bellwether, dark wood, leather chairs, the kind of place that didn't put prices on the menu. He had ordered 2 bottles of something expensive enough to feel like revenge. He was celebrating the fact that a pregnant teacher had been escorted out of the school where he thought he was supposed to be obeyed. When he placed his card on the tray, the waiter came back 2 minutes later with the look of someone who wished he had called in sick. Declined. Mason stared at him, then snatched the card and called his banker. 6 missed calls were already on his phone. His company's stock had dropped 17% in the last 4 hours. 2 of his private accounts were empty, not frozen. Empty, like the money had never been there. Then his head of security received a text. Mason watched him read it, watched the color leave his face, watched him put the phone in his pocket, stand up, and walk out of the club without saying a word. Mason sat alone at the table, 2 untouched bottles of wine in front of him, no way to pay for them. He spent the night trying to hire people to fix it. He knew names, dangerous ones, men who solved problems for people with enough money. He met the first one in a parking garage just after midnight, slid a bag of emergency cash across the hood of a car, then showed him what had been waiting in his mailbox when he got home, a black envelope, sealed in dark red wax, stamped with the image of a raven's wing. The man looked at the seal for a long moment, then pushed the money back, got in his car, and left. The second man did not even sit down. He saw the seal and shook his head before Mason finished speaking. The third was older, quiet, a man with a scar across one eyebrow and a reputation for taking jobs other men refused. He looked at the envelope, then looked at Mason. "You put your hands on someone you shouldn't have touched." "Who is he?" Mason asked, his voice rising. The man stepped back. "Someone who doesn't negotiate. He collects." Mason drove to his private airfield at 2 a.m. He had a jet, he had cash, he had a plan. Leave the country, wait it out, rebuild somewhere else. He was 50 feet from the stairs when the headlights came on. 3 black SUVs appeared from the dark edges of the tarmac like they had been sitting there for hours, which they had. 6 men stepped out. No weapons showing, no shouting. They simply took his arms, covered his head, and drove. When the bag came off, Mason Erickson was kneeling on a cold marble floor. The room was large, almost completely dark, except for one light at the far end of a long table. Sitting there with a cup of tea and a calm expression was the man from the school hallway. The raven tattoo on his neck was clear now. Silas Brooks set down his cup and looked at Mason the way someone looks at a problem already solved. Mason tried the only tool he had always trusted. "I have friends in Washington," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Silas slid a tablet across the table. It stopped in front of Mason's knees. On the screen was the school hallway footage, full view, time-stamped. Ethan bullying Mateo, Mason storming in, Colin being shoved aside, Amara standing in front of the classroom door, the threats, the card holder, the shove, Amara's hands going to her stomach, Warren Pike shaking Mason's hand and firing her. Mason stared at it. Silas said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You thought she was alone." His voice was quiet enough that Mason had to strain to hear it. "You thought nobody was coming." He leaned forward slightly. "She has me." A lawyer stepped out of the shadows with a stack of documents. Silas explained the terms without emotion. Every asset, the company, the properties, the vehicles, the patents, the emergency cash Mason had brought to the airfield, all transferred immediately. Every penny would go into a legal trust for scholarship students, immigrant families, and pregnant teachers who needed help staying on their feet. The structure could not be reversed. The gym bag of cash had already been collected. Mason cried while signing, real tears. Not guilt, loss. The kind that comes when power leaves your hands and does not look back. When he was done, the bag went over his head again. They drove for 20 minutes. When they pushed him out, he hit wet pavement and rolled twice before stopping. He tore the bag off, looked up. St. Marcellus Academy. The same front steps where Amara had stood in the rain with her classroom box. Mason Erickson sat there with nothing but the clothes on his back. Then the police cars came, because while Mason had been trying to run, Silas had sent 10 years of fraud records to 3 federal agencies. Tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement, all documented, all delivered anonymously. The officers stepped out. Mason did not run. There was nowhere left to run. 6 months later, morning sunlight came through the tall windows of room 214. The classroom was warm and quiet. Fresh notebooks stacked on desks. A soft mobile hanging near the back corner. The sound of a baby breathing. Amara Brooks sat near the window with her daughter against her chest. The baby had full cheeks, dark hair, and lungs strong enough that Amara still laughed when she remembered how loudly she had announced herself the day she arrived. She was perfect. Silas stood near the classroom door with his hands folded, looking at his niece with an expression Amara had rarely seen on his face. Open, unguarded, human. He had bought St. Marcellus Academy 8 months earlier, quietly, through 3 education trusts and 2 shell companies. The board did not know who owned the school until the paperwork was finalized. Then they knew. And then Warren Pike had quietly resigned, which turned out not to matter, because the new ownership had already begun processing his termination. Warren Pike was still employed in the building, not as principal. The custodial team had been short-staffed. As Amara watched her daughter sleep, she heard the squeak of a mop bucket in the hallway. She looked up through the open door. Warren Pike passed slowly, older-looking than she remembered, eyes down. He looked into room 214, saw her, saw the baby, then looked away and kept walking. She did not call after him. She did not need to. She looked back at her daughter. Silas crossed the room and stood beside her desk. He looked at the baby for a long moment, then at Amara. "You doing good?" he asked. Amara laughed. Small, real, tired. "Yes," she said. "I'm good." Silas nodded once, like that settled something he had been holding for months. Across town, Mason's Erickson sat in a federal holding facility in an orange jumpsuit. The money was gone. The lawyers were gone. The board members and club friends and men who had once laughed with him over wine were gone. He had spent 45 years building a life where no was a word other people heard. Not him. He had learned what happened when he was wrong about that. Amara kissed her daughter's forehead and breathed in the warmth of her. The storm was over. Not because the powerful man had fallen, though he had, completely. Not because the coward principal was mopping floors, though he was. But because she was back in the classroom she loved, with her daughter breathing softly against her chest, and her brother standing quietly by the door. And the world outside had no claim on her, not anymore. She had fought for a normal life her whole life. She had not realized that sometimes the people who love you fight for it too. Some people mistake quiet for weakness. They forget that silence sometimes belongs to people who simply have not chosen to act yet.